Good afternoon, guys. My name is Matt Zeely, and this is the Z-List Cars, where we will discuss nearly all things automotive, including best values, fantasy garages, all-time best, all-time worst, and so much more. I hope to expand this channel in the near future by offering some content out there in the field, where we can maybe even eventually do a review or two, do some outdoor adventure stuff with my current rig, and just generally include some different locations and different types of content than being at home in my garage where we are today due to being quarantined from the coronavirus. Hopefully we can get past the peak of all this soon and things will get a little more back to normal. So anyways, as your gracious host, I like to think that I carry the privilege of calling myself a car enthusiast. I guess I'll let you guys be the judge of that. And no, I have not owned an Alfa Romeo, one of the enthusiast essentials according to some, or an air-cooled Porsche, or a I did have a moderately powerful station wagon, and it did have 3 pedals, but no jalopnik, it was not brown, and it was not a diesel, so more on that later. Anyways, in addition to that, even what I do for a living involves cars, so I did want to given the circumstances, give you guys a little forum to join, channel to watch, and a place where we can freely share our knowledge, opinions, and experiences about all the cars we love, maybe even some that we don't. So without any further ado, let's get into the first episode. I wanted to start out by talking about redesigns. Now, with most brands, there's a set life cycle for models. Example, BMW typically has a 7-year life cycle for most of their models, and with a mid-cycle refresh, LCI as they call it, but these things generally sharpen up and tweak some of the features, amenities, and styling cues to really modernize things and bring a design that's a few years old more in line with current trends in the business. Full redesigns, however, can often come as a bit of a shock to fans of outgoing models. And I generally am a fan of modern car styling. I mean, beauty is always in the eye of the beholder, right? So of course there'll always be naysayers for any model that receives a full redesign. I know my list of smile-inducing redesigns would be a very long one. So what I'd like to talk to you guys about today is my least favorite redesigns. And we're gonna go over the top 5 least favorite redesigns of all time. So without any further ado, let's get into it. So the first one we're going to start off with is actually a vehicle that not many enthusiasts are going to be having on their radar at all, as it is a family crossover SUV. It's a great one, actually. I mean, it might not be able to quite offer the functionality that a minivan does for families. It certainly offers 3 rows of seating, great standard equipment, car-like handling and maneuverability, and great V6 engines. I'm talking, of course, about the Acura MDX, second generation in particular. Although, as I mentioned, I've always thought the MDX is a great vehicle for its intended purposes, I thought the second generation was a huge step forward from the first, which looked essentially like the sort of Platinum Edition Honda that a lot of Acuras from the late 90s and early 2000s did. That all changed in 2007 with the introduction of the second generation model called the YD2, and its sporty body styling with large dual exhaust outlets, bigger wheels, aggressive looking grille and headlight design, and standard super handling all-wheel drive. Technology was greatly improved and the interior felt leaps and bounds ahead of the previous generation. I always thought that this was a great era for Acura styling. The TL sedan at this time also hit a sweet spot in the sporty looks department, and that one was loved by many compared to the model that came after it. Back to the MDX, fast forward to 2014, Acura showed off the new YD3 model to the United States. Although initially flashy with its jewel-like strip of LEDs in the headlights, I felt that the third generation MDX didn't offer much more in terms of stylistic advancement when compared to the model that came before it. Gone were the dual exhaust, the taillights looked much less distinctive, the overall body style blended in a lot more of the rest of the mid-size crossover SUV upscale market than the sporty, unique-looking thing that came before it, I thought. The interior also seemed to take a step backwards to me with unimpressive materials, seemingly lower level of design quality than before, and just kind of begged the question to me, why not just buy a loaded Pilot? So, number 4 of my least favorite redesigns. This we're going to go over to Mercedes-Benz, particularly their beautiful big coupe, or at one time beautiful, the CL Class. That's right. The second generation, the C215 Mercedes-Benz CL Class, which I believe was introduced in the United States for 2001, Europe in the late 90s, but it lasted until 2006. and when it was redesigned to the C216 or 216 Mercedes-Benz CL class, which lasted from 2007 to 2014. Now, this represents one of my favorite big body luxury coupes of all time. More or less of an S-Class coupe, which it is now referred to as. CL started out in the 90s with the C140 generation, which I always thought looked appropriately elegant, upscale, and expensive for its time. It was redesigned in the late 90s for the European market with the introduction of the C215 model, which brought the 4 oval headlight look onto Mercedes' big coupe, a look that I will elaborate further on in discussion of another Mercedes-Benz model that is on this list. So get ready. I believe this debuted, I mentioned, in 2001. I always liked when a car manufacturer keeps a similar family design language throughout its entire model range. Helps greatly with brand recognition. Loyalists to the brand love it. This was in following with Mercedes-Benz introducing the 4 oval headlight look on the E-Class in the 90s with the W210 and later into the 211. I'll be discussing that shortly. But anyways, I thought it worked very well on the big coupe. It had the pillarless design on the windows and large triangular taillights. Just really, really iconic looking car, I think. And then in 2016 came the C216, which I'll cut straight to the chase. Looks like a Honda to me compared to the outgoing C215. Hondas are great cars in their own right, so I don't mean that as a bad thing, but I wouldn't necessarily want my $100,000+ flagship luxury coupe from Mercedes-Benz resembling one. Gone was the 4 headlight look and the triangular taillight look, and instead we got this rather anonymous front and rear end styling, which led to a big coupe body style, which, I mean, if the Mercedes-Benz emblem, if the stars were removed, it just feels like it could be a big bulbous coupe from any Asian or domestic manufacturer in the 90s, maybe. It just didn't really look like a high-end Mercedes. But with all that being said, I mean, there was still a lot to like about the C216. It had many of the traits that made the first and second generation so great. Smooth, powerful drivetrains, rich interior materials, loads of technology. Then again, in this class of car and at this price range, you expect to get that stuff. This next one involves one of my favorite brands that I've always admired, have never owned an example of, and someday certainly hope to as my first British car. This will be Jaguar. For me, it's the XK, particularly the transition from the beautiful X100 body style, which was the first generation that was introduced to the US in 1997 and lasted until 2005. I always thought that the first generation XK, the X100, was a beautiful coupe, and I'm not much of a convertible guy, but thought the drop-top version looked the business as well. Jaguar produced this style for quite a while, about 8 years, and refreshed it a bit along the way with an awesome supercharged R version and minor styling tweaks here and there. As all good things must come to an end, it was time for a redesign, and in 2006 they introduced the X150, the second generation XK. My first time seeing one of these in a new car magazine is a memory of disappointment. Compared to the outgoing model, I thought the headlights and front end looked like they could have come from an anonymous Korean car. I mean, no offense to Korean cars, they're putting out some amazing product these days. But the redesigned X150 looked to me like it had a face that belonged to many other less expensive, less exclusive vehicles. The first generation X100 had this kind of unique tapered look to the headlights that sort of really looked a proper part of the body style, and the X150, the second generation, just kind of felt like another where do we go from here head-scratching moment when the design team came up with the headlights and kind of said, we'll just go with this. And it just kind of looked anonymous and didn't really match the rest of the design cues. With that being said, I actually did think that this generation maintained an overall attractive shape and body style during this era, as the hips, if you will, and the bulbous fender styling and overall graceful lines from the original X100 did remain more or less intact. However, the headlights and taillights, along with an interior that, although decently luxurious, didn't feel like much of a step forward from the older model, made this final generation of the Jaguar XK one of my least favorite redesigned models of all time. The X150 was produced all the way through 2015, which marked the final production year, I believe, and they did refresh the headlights. And towards the end of the model year run, I felt that this was a bit of an improvement from the original letdown in 2006. So, number 2 of my least favorite redesigns. Here we go again with Mercedes-Benz, and this will be, yes, you guessed it, the W211 Mercedes-Benz E-Class in the US from 03 to 09 to the W212 E-Class from 2010 to 2016. Now, since the mid-90s, the E-Class has always looked very stately and elegant, perhaps leaning more towards the luxury end of the segment than the sporty end of the 5 Series, and that was okay. The introduction of the 4 circular headlight look of the W210 marked the beginning of an era that I thought would last quite a bit longer. I thought it was a pretty iconic look, and that the same theme carried over quite gracefully into the next body style, the W211, sold again from 2003 to 2009 in the US. The 211, I think, has always been widely appreciated as a great-looking sedan. The front end was a light modern evolution of the 4 circular headlight look that came before it in the 210. Taillights differed a bit more, but still went with the lines of the car well. This new body style seemed like a step backwards to me. I mean, the taillights also became something that I could confuse with a Toyota sedan, it seemed like. I saw those and was like, wow, that could be anything. They seemed quite out of line with the styling of other Mercedes sedans from the time, and the interior wasn't quite as off-putting to me, though. It came together pretty well, I thought, and introduced, I think, some ambient lighting at the time into the E-Class that had gone on to become quite a trademark for Mercedes-Benz interiors, and many have followed this trend. I did think the interior of the 211 model felt more special and went with the exterior a little better, and was also more modern. Modern automotive interior design seems to have less straight lines and more flowing shapes and curved lines. The 212 seemed to go back to the straight-lined interiors of the 90s a bit. That's my take on the second least favorite redesign of all time. On to number 1. Okay, now you're gonna call me cliche, call me a broken record here. This might be one you've heard before, but I am gonna go on to the BMW 5 Series, and particularly the E39 transition to the E60. Yes, I'm sure you all heard it before, but the E39 is very near and dear to my heart, as we'll discuss when we go over the cars I've owned personally in the past. But I've held this opinion well before I ever had an E39 of my own. As many have stated before, the E39 5 Series sedan is aging quite well in my opinion, and it was a styling triumph of understated elegance, I think. The lines were classy and sleek, yet subtle and refined. And even in your base, in the States, 525i, 528i, they still looked athletic, well-proportioned, and, although very restrained, just aggressive enough for its day to give one a second look when one might have been approaching in your rear view. The interior was also a fine blend of sporty cockpit-like feel and luxurious materials that was very befitting of such a sports sedan in its day. And I think it set the bar for many future sport luxury sedans, some of which took heavy inspiration from it. Well, of course, us gearheads will always covet and focus on the M5. I'm talking about the whole 5 Series lineup here, even down to the more basic trims. As a preteen and teenager during the E39 years, I always wondered how they were going to top it and what things would look like when the new model came out. Well, here's another part of this 5 Series redesign discussion that's going to sound very typical and cliche, the part about not liking crisp bangle styling. As many of you will already know, 2002 marked the beginning of the bangle era for BMW as the new 7 Series came out, the E65, and the much hated iDrive and the polarizing styling. I really never felt so strongly about that redesign as much as I did the 5 Series. I did think the E38 was a beautiful German flagship sedan, maybe a little too understated, but I didn't hate the E65 quite as much as many did, and I thought that if nothing else, it looked modern, futuristic, and distinctive. I don't quite share the same sentiment for the E65 series. When the E60 came out, we were all riding high from the final years of the E39 with the beautiful M-parallel wheels and updated headlights and bumper treatments, only adding modern touches to an already beautiful design. When the E60 came out in the US in 2003 as an 04 model, its sharp angles, busy creases, and radical changes to the predecessor, I just couldn't get on board, and to be honest, I still can't. I do recognize some of the positive points of the E60, of course. I mean, of course, there's the M version with its, one of the most exotic sounding and driving four-door sedans it's ever made, arguably, with its rev-happy V10 that made intoxicating noises. There just might be some YouTube content out there about that one. Since I owned an E39 with a V8, I was always drawn to the 535 and the 550 and the fact that they were available with a manual transmission. Despite one's feeling on styling, still cool cars. Time and mileage proved that they could be a bit finicky. They were the last generation of 5 Series with hydraulic power steering, and again, get behind the wheel of one. There's a lot to enjoy. That's the list for now, guys. Thank you so much for watching. And I look forward to hearing your opinions in the comments. If you like what you see, please do consider subscribing, as there should be a lot more good stuff in store soon. So in the meantime, stay safe, stay healthy, and see you soon.